Imagine it's 1941. The world's supply chains are in tatters. German U-boats are turning the Atlantic into a graveyard for ships carrying wheat and grain. In Britain, families are already on rations, measuring their flour and sugar by the ounce. Across Europe and Asia, fields have become battlefields, making harvests impossible. Bread, humanity's oldest comfort food, has suddenly become a luxury that spoils in days. People are desperate, turning to potato flour, chestnut meal, even powdered grass. But none of it lasts. This was the central problem. How do you feed a nation and its army when your most basic food rots before the next shipment can even arrive? Deep inside military research labs in Britain, Germany, and the United States, food scientists were grappling with this very question. They posed a radical idea. What if we could make flour that never goes bad? They started by examining why flour spoils. It's not just about age, it's about moisture and fat. The germ inside each wheat kernel contains natural oils that eventually go rancid. And when flour absorbs moisture from the air, it awakens dormant bacteria and mold, starting the process of decay. The scientists realized if they could defeat these two enemies, fat and moisture, flour could potentially last for years, maybe even decades. So, they began experimenting with everything from low-fat wheat to advanced dehydration techniques. It was food science at its most practical, born from pure desperation. Then, in 1942, a small group of chemists at the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps achieved the breakthrough. They called it stabilized composite flour. And it wasn't just a single ingredient. It was a precise formula. A blend of refined wheat flour, dehydrated skim milk, soy powder, and salt, where every component had a job. The wheat flour provided the starchy structure. The soy added protein and acted as a natural emulsifier, keeping the mix perfectly uniform. Powdered milk contributed lactose and minerals, which helped with flavor and browning when baked. And salt served as both a flavor enhancer and a mild preservative. But the real magic was in the final step: gentle dehydration. The entire mixture was heated slowly to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit, just enough to drive out every last trace of moisture without actually cooking the starches. Once cooled, the flour was packed into wax-lined, sealed tins. Years later, when they opened those tins, the results were astonishing. No mold, no funky smell, no clumping. The flour was as fresh as the day it was made. Its shelf life? A minimum of 10 years, sometimes longer. For wartime logistics, this was nothing short of a miracle. To really get the genius behind this, you have to think like a food chemist. When you drop the moisture content of a food below about 5%, bacteria and fungi simply can't survive. There isn't enough water for their biological processes to function. By also keeping fats to a minimum and balancing the proteins, the scientists essentially closed off every possible path for spoilage. The soy flour even acted like a microscopic sponge, locking in flavor compounds while preventing oxidation. Even insects, the eternal enemy of stored grains, couldn't infest the mix. It was simply too dry to support life. The result was a lightweight, nutrient-dense, and incredibly versatile food. Soldiers used it to bake biscuits, thicken soups, and make emergency porridge. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked flawlessly, every single time. It wasn't long before wartime bulletins leaked the secret to the public. Homemakers across Britain and America started creating their own simplified versions right in their kitchens. The recipe was beautifully simple. Spread plain flour on a baking tray. Toast it at a low heat for about an hour. Let it cool. Then mix in some powdered milk and a pinch of salt. They'd seal it in glass jars. Their version might not have lasted 10 years, but getting 5 years of safe storage was still life-changing. For families enduring rationing, This was the definition of food security. This small survival habit was passed down quietly through generations, with some rural households keeping toasted flour jars in their pantries well into the 1950s. After the war, military warehouses were full of leftover tins of this stabilized flour. Instead of being thrown away, aid agencies distributed them for disaster relief during floods, earthquakes, and famines. Mountaineers and sailors also discovered its value. The famous 1953 British Everest expedition carried tins of the same wartime mix to bake high-altitude biscuits. Even Arctic explorers reported that the flour resisted clumping in frozen, humid conditions. And quietly, the commercial food industry took notice. By the late 1950s, this same principle had evolved into the baking mixes we see today: pancake mix, biscuit mix, instant bread powders. The foundation of every Just Add Water product on our shelves traces directly back to that 1942 military invention. Ironically, as modern conveniences like refrigeration and industrial food production became widespread, the original method was almost completely forgotten. Why bother toasting flour when you can just freeze bread or buy a fresh loaf every day? By the 1970s, very few people even remembered that this naturally stable, chemical-free flour ever existed. Yet, for preppers, homesteaders, and modern explorers, this lost knowledge holds immense value, especially as we face a world with its own supply chain shocks and fragile transport systems. And the best part? You can still make it today. The process is just as simple, safe, and inexpensive as it was 80 years ago. Start with low-fat, unbleached wheat flour. Whole grain flour has too many oils and will spoil faster. Spread it thinly on a baking tray and heat it gently at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour to drive out all the moisture. Let it cool completely. Then, for every 5 parts of wheat flour, mix in 1 part soy flour, a tablespoon of powdered skim milk per cup, and a pinch of salt. Store this blend in airtight containers like glass jars with rubber seals, or, for maximum longevity, vacuum-sealed Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Kept cool and dry, this modern version can stay fresh for 5 to 10 years. The true brilliance of the 1942 formula wasn't some high-tech gadgetry. It was a deep understanding of nature's own rules. If you can control air, water, and fat, you can essentially control time. It's the same principle used today in everything from astronaut meals to modern survival rations. And maybe that's the real lesson hidden in this forgotten flour. True resilience doesn't come from complex machines or chemicals. It comes from knowledge, from the ability to adapt, to think critically, and to make the simplest resources last. In a world obsessed with convenience, this old wartime mix is a quiet reminder that sometimes the smartest innovations are the ones that rely on nothing but common sense. So next time you open a box of pancake mix, remember, it all started in a desperate war lab, with scientists trying to make flour last forever. Because survival, just like history itself, is built one clever idea at a time. If you enjoyed uncovering this lost survival secret, be sure to subscribe for more stories of forgotten genius, where history holds lessons that can still feed the future. Thanks for watching.